Have you ever been working on yourself where, for example, you have something like Neville Goddard's material or Emmet, and in it you can literally read the stuff that imagination creates reality. Now, usually for all of us, we're not raised with this concept at all. We almost never hear anything about it, right? So as we grow older and we hear this stuff, we might feel there's truth in this. I want to create my life according to this knowledge, to this wisdom. But then there's also these old beliefs and these old habits, right, that are holding you back. Now, what are we to do if we want to improve this situation in our life? If we want to create more positive momentum, because that is what today's question will be about. So I'm just going to give my take on this, and again, as I said in a previous video, every time people stumble upon this content, they're free to leave their thoughts about it in the comment section below if they have their own insights on it. But other than that, let's go over this question for today. It said, how do you both build positive momentum and beliefs while processing the old, outdated ones? For example, let's say I was bullied in childhood and people said I was ugly. Or maybe I just felt that way compared to others. How can I process this while still building a new momentum or beliefs of feeling beautiful? I guess I'm inquiring about shadow work. Would this just be inner child work? Sometimes I feel like I overthink all of this and try to do it logically instead of intuitively. I often want to rush the process because of course part of me wants life to feel better. Any advice? Well, this is actually a pretty interesting question, because I'm assuming like these questions that I'm about to share through my channel are questions that I feel that are generally happening with humans. So they're general enough that they could perhaps serve more people than just one person that is asking the question. So if somebody is saying here, for example, let's say I was bullied in childhood and people said I was ugly, or maybe I just felt that way compared to others, how can I process this while still building a new momentum and beliefs of feeling beautiful? Well, I would say they said there was an example, right? But there's people out there that actually are going through just that. So let's not joke around about that. There are people that are suffering in that way. So how can they process this? Well, it sounds easier said than done in most cases, and perhaps it's not always as doable depending on the situation that they're still in, perhaps. But ultimately it comes down to a process of both forgiveness and understanding who you are, understanding your actual spiritual nature. Because if you understand your spiritual nature, you know that the beauty is in the eye of the beholder, first of all, but second of all, this beauty that you're seemingly talking about, physically speaking, is not actually portraying the real beauty of you at all. I mean, I could look at you and I could say, well, you look handsome or you look beautiful. I mean, you can say these things physically speaking, but at the same time, I'm well aware that that is not just the whole picture of you. But yet that is where we live. That is why people are so obsessed with their looks. And again, this person actually said comparing to others, right? Well, that's what most young people as well do. They go through this phase where they compare themselves to all their peers, and then as you grow older you realize it's kind of stupid, because the more you compare yourself with others, the less you're actually allowing your own uniqueness to shine through. And this uniqueness is of the soul, that's the spiritual part of you. That is ultimately, I would say, what makes a person really beautiful. It's not just their physical looks, it's their personality. And if the personality is led by the soul, well, then you have a beautiful person, I would say. So in this case, if you've been bullied, of course, stuff like that happens. And then as you grow older, hopefully by the time you're out of that place where you're being bullied, you can do some better work on yourself of letting go and forgiving, perhaps. But you don't have to forgive these bullies in the sense of that you're like hoping great things will happen for them necessarily. I mean, yeah, it sounds kind of grotesque, but really the idea of forgiveness is to set yourself free and not so much the other person, because there's some mean people in this world after all, and you know, we can't control how everybody acts, and therefore it's about forgiveness in the sense of letting go, of letting this thought go that caused you to feel so bad, of learning to let go of what other people say about you. Now, they also mentioned that they're inquiring about shadow work or inner child work. Now, to me personally, from what I've read here and there about this inner child work at times and shadow work, I sometimes, honestly feel like people are either taking it a little to the extreme, or they're not entirely clear on how to truly go about this from a very spiritual approach. So I've read it sometimes that people said, should I act like a child? I'm trying to act like I'm a child again. And I'm like, inner child work to me personally is not what it's about. And inquiring about shadow work is actually really interesting for me. As I would look at it, it is about using, again, your intuition, even though this person said, I'm trying to do this logically instead of intuitively. Well, that's perhaps your first mistake to a certain extent, because if you use it intuitively, you can simply become aware of what are the dark parts of my own personality right now that are still active in my consciousness. And then what happens, if you were to go all scriptural about it, you see that is Satan in action. That is the force of Satan within us, of course. It's the negative part of us that's trying to grab our attention, grab us to stay away from the positive, from the divine, from the spiritual realms of freedom and peace and bliss. So it is really intuitive work though. But all this stuff that I see here, if we go back to the main question as it is stated, there's some good insights we can gain from this in general very rapidly. So how do you build positive momentum and beliefs while processing the old outdated ones? Well, the way you do that is by the processing of the old outdated ones is not something you have to go through. You don't have to be like, why did I have this belief? And process it in all kinds of ways. All you have to do is switch your mindset. You switch your state of consciousness to what you want it to be instead of on what it used to be. And new beliefs, they develop through repetition of an idea. So if you do that, you are building momentum by the fact that you're consciously and deliberately working on a better belief structure for yourself on a daily basis. And then the old beliefs, the outdated ones, slowly they fall away. They lie dormant again, they go inactive. Because this is what you gotta understand. Those beliefs that you're having can be the same as somebody else is having them. They may be worded differently, but this is such an important spiritual insight, I would say, is that many of the things we think are our own is actually shared on a spiritual, universal level. So they're just states of consciousness through which we go. So therefore these beliefs, they just come and go. And the momentum comes in when you focus specifically and deliberately on a daily basis on where you want to go. And then where you want to go is dependent on a certain set of beliefs. So for example, I've said this time and time again with me and YouTube. Well, it used to be I didn't believe in myself and being a YouTuber, and then I started doing it, and then the belief started to grow, and the old belief of me not being a YouTuber simply fell away. So people would sometimes, years ago this is by the way, but then people might be like, oh, he's doing YouTube, they would kind of like laugh or think that's silly. That's like, what is he gonna do? But then I let the old belief simply fade away. It slid off me, and I was able to focus fully on developing this belief of what it means to be a YouTuber in my case, So you don't really give attention to your old, outdated beliefs, because it's in the question as well. If they're outdated, they're already time to be just let go of. The time is now to let go of all of them. And then the outdated is simply replaced with something better, I hope, for you. And that's where you consciously decide, where do I want to go? What do I want to manifest for myself? What kind of life do I want to live? And as you analyze that just for fun in yourself, if you're aware of it, you already know what kind of belief you need. It all comes through intuition. This is what people sometimes do. They think they try to assume that they're more ignorant than they really are. They try to assume that they're more, you could say, dumb than they really are. I mean, that's just the case with us humans. Sometimes we're afraid of taking responsibility, or we're afraid of what actually happens if we follow these great, newly established beliefs, because they would change our lives dramatically. In the final part, they said they often feel like they want to rush the process because, of course, part of me wants life to feel better. Life can feel better right this moment, but of course, it can be a great gap between where you are and where you want to be. And how do you close that gap? By inner contemplation, by meditation, by being aware, by being actually consciously working on what you want and where you want to go. So this rushing is also a kind of a state of desperation. I don't really like it personally. I am almost always very careful with this one for myself, because in this statement there's something I don't really like about it personally. So it's nothing about the person, but let me read that again. I often want to rush the process because of course part of me wants the life to feel better, which is like stating that life will only be better once something happens. And that is a trap. That is a very subtle trap that many humans fall into. They say, once this occurs, once that has happened, then I'll be happy, then I'll feel better. And then when they achieve that, they will feel better, of course, but then after a little while they realize there's no permanent happiness in any of these physical things. So I want something better, something greater, then I'll be happy again. And that is like how humanity, how we're all just rushing blindly through life, ultimately reaching the grave. And what have we learned? That there's no permanent happiness in any of this. So where's the permanent happiness then? How could you actually feel that life is better right in this very moment? You do that by understanding what life is, by actually grasping spiritually that life is eternal. And because of that, it's a beautiful, fascinating journey. And instantly, once that dawns on you, not intellectually, but spiritually, then you will instantly feel better already. And that's the goal, to understand your eternal nature. So you no longer have to run after things that hopefully will make you feel better after some time of going through darkness, because that is where most people live. It doesn't have to be that way. See, that's why I perhaps didn't really like that statement as much for myself, because it instantly triggers in me like, wait a minute, but that doesn't make any sense. But you see, that's where I've been personally as well in the past, years ago, and I know many people are still in there until the grave. This attitude where you're seeking the happiness and the feeling better through things, by chasing things, and therefore you're actually blinding yourself to the happiness and well-being that you could experience right here, right now, if you were to awaken to your spiritual eternal self, that will heal you from everything, that will make it clear to you that this is all a temporary journey physically speaking. And therefore it's the physical part itself that needs to become into obedience of the spiritual self that is eternal. Because if it's the other way around, we constantly suffer because we're living in a world of impermanence, physically speaking again. And yet that is where people seek their happiness. So the greatest momentum you'll ever have in overcoming these old, outdated beliefs is by becoming aware of your spiritual self. Once that dawns upon you, it overrides all the nonsense that you physically may have gotten through up until that point. And you will finally go upwards towards bliss and God. And that is what it's all about. So you see, the momentum again, it comes by us actively and deliberately working on them every single day. But also by becoming simply more and more aware of who we really are, spiritually speaking. Because then we no longer will wait and seek for us to feel better someday in the future based on a physical change. That's the trap. That is a very subtle trap. And I hope you'll think about it for yourself. Now, if you're new to this channel, consider subscribing to receive inspirational videos on a regular basis. And with that being said, dear viewer, never forget that we are the dreamers.